At the United Nations in Geneva, the third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent is happening. Guyana is represented there by a diverse delegation, which included Ministers Oneidge Walrond and Joseph Hamilton. We are joined by Ministers Walrond and Hamilton to go a little bit into some of the things that were raised at that meeting. Ministers, can you hear us?
Yes, good evening. Oh,
Good
good day for
evening,
you.
Erwin.
Uh, good
Yes,
evening for us.
good evening for us.
Thank
Yes.
you very much. Thank you both for joining us. Some statements have come out so far. We've seen media reports as well. There's actually some reports on social media by an entity that I can only refer to as a blog, as it tries to parade itself as a media source. But when we think about the International Decade for People of African Descent, I think there's a distinction that has to be made between two things. One, the International Decade itself as an event, and the second thing is the organization that was established, calling itself IDPADA-G Incorporated. So, what exactly is the difference there, and why is it important to know the distinction?
Yes, Darwin. So it's important for the public to recognize the distinction because what has happened is one group is now identifying themselves as the International Decade of People of African Descent, when in fact, this is a unique platform that was formed and declared in 2014 by the United Nations to for a decade to dedicate an entire decade for the recognition and advancement of people of African descent. It's a form. It was a mandate, so to speak, for where a framework was formed to with of several activities to recognize people of African descent who have coming out of the scourge of slavery have had in many societies have been still have been facing systemic marginalization. And so this and the fact that some in some societies people of African descent have felt that their contributions were not acknowledged and they were not given a fair opportunity um, to advance themselves and to promote their culture. And so this international decade, it is actually the decade is actually coming to an end in 2025. The was to it was this platform to promote the Afro to promote our people of African descent in all parts of the world and who have had this horrible history of slavery and coming out of slavery and in some societies what that meant, that trauma. And it was to it's a platform to give voice to the African people. And so it is all across the world. It's a decade identified, a platform identified for the promotion of people of Afro descendancy. The IPADA-G, as it is in short, it is, like I said, it's a platform. But and so the fact that we have a group in Guyana that are calling themselves this decade, who have decided that they are the decade. It cannot the two don't compute. And like you said, they're actually an organization, a company that was formed and using the name the international people of the International Decade of People of African Descent, using that name to promote their own self-interest. Now let's understand that the government of Guyana had um, decided that they were rightfully so that they were going to support this UN declaration, this UN decade for advancements of people of African. Every nation signed on to this resolution, this proclamation. Every nation had decided that they were going to use the frameworks as set out in the UN to implement them in their different in their various and their respective countries, and Guyana was no exception. And what has happened though is that the persons and the persons that we see who claim to represent African and Afrocentric organizations have hijacked or are attempting to hijack this noble mandate that the UN has conceived, and all over the world that there is so much work and good work that can come out for African people and Afro descendants, that all of the benefits that come out of it have been hijacked by just a handful of people, and who claim that they are the sole owners of this mandate, and it cannot be so. It cannot be so.
Now, there's some 78 organizations, based on the statement that was made by the representative for IDPADA-G, for the organization calling itself IDPADA-G at this meeting, Nigel Hughes. The claim is that this IDPADA-G Incorporated represents 78 non-governmental organizations. But if memory serves me correct, there was an issue a few years ago regarding the funding that this organization calling itself IDPADA-G was receiving. Funding which started under the last government, accumulated amount of nearly $500 million, for which the organizations which they claim to represent came out and said that they were not receiving any sort of a benefit, prompting the government to move this one entity aside and instead engage directly with those organizations itself. But how could there be a
Well, let me just
statement?
interject there. Let me just interject. The government didn't move the organization aside, right? I mean, as a reaction to the cry of the African groups and these non-governmental organizations who were saying that we are not getting any benefits as Afro Guyanese. We are not seeing any benefits from this organization that you have set up. And what our government did, was to launch an investigation, was to do an audit, an inquiry. They were like, we have budgeted. There is in the budget every single year a few $100 million for this organization. How can we say? And so there was an audit, and as a result of the audit, there was found several issues of non-accountability of the funds. If you are funneling funds to non-governmental organizations, then the receipts should show, and they were not able to produce. And hundreds of millions of dollars were unaccounted for. So that was the reason for government to say, well, something is amiss here, and we have to remedy this.
I remember that there was an admission that a large amount of that money actually was used to pay their overhead costs, paying for their salaries, paying for the rent, and I think they had also done some amount of work on the space that they were using as well. So it sort of boggles the mind as to how exactly the organizations that they claim to represent were actually benefiting from this entire thing.
No, let me jump in here. So as my colleague outlined, you have had a couple of people who hijacked a noble project. So this project is a noble project. This project is a project that the government has signed on to. The president himself, he has been speaking about this matter in and out of Guyana about the issue of reparations, and his government. We have been making the call for reparations for people of African descent. Now, a couple of things. They hijacked the project. They commingled the project, and as indicated by Minister Walrond, they deliberately confused African Guyanese as to where is the UN project, using the same name actually, and they set up a company that you had a couple of people managing the funds that was given by the government to this organization. The other important point for people to note is that this project, they took it and made it a political project. Because if you go back in time, the office space that was rented belongs to people with PNCR allegiance. So a lot of the funds were being funneled there to support a political cause. As indicated, I think in the audit, Minister Walrond spoke about 80% or more of the monies went to salaries, and they could not show as to what they did for people of African descent. Any project, any developmental project of which the money that they were handling should have gone to. Instead of, the bulk of the money went to paying people who were involved in politics more than representing the people of African descent. So that's the background, and so we come to what Nigel Hughes parroted today. You know, I thought about it when Mr. Hughes was finished. It takes a special human being to travel thousands of miles to come to this forum, not to speak to how we move from where we are to go forward as people of African descent, but just to deliberately castigate the government. And that was his plan and program. And I would say this, I would want to believe Mr. Hughes deliberately utilized the report of something else to make this general point. I don't think he didn't know. I think he deliberately did that to hoodwink the people who are at the conference. And so somehow these guys believe that when they come out here and they do that, they are making the government look bad. Not understanding is an attempt to make the country look bad, the country from which you belong. And that's something for them to consider. But we know they don't have that consideration in mind. Now, the other important issue, and I've said this already, these guys, they ascribe to themselves some authority to speak on our behalf. I'm Afro-Guyanese. I'm a person of African descent. I never gave them the authority or the responsibility to speak on my behalf. I can speak for myself. And I know tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Afro-Guyanese. These people don't speak for them. They have their own agenda. And going back to these organizations that indicated to the government that they were not given any money from this government subvention, they indicated that they cried and they pleaded, but no money was forthcoming. And as indicated earlier by Minister Walt, that's the reason why the government took the position that we will channel the money to the organizations themselves. We don't need this middleman group whose agenda is not in keeping with the UN established agenda and the mandate as regards the project to deal with the issues of people of African descent. The other important point to make is, look, countries are different, and you cannot wholesalely bring into our space, and that's what they attempted to do, utilizing IDPADA-G and the others. If you recall, where they attempted to import this Black Lives Matter issue coming out of the United States, the type of racism and the type of discrimination and all the things you could speak about that still continues to plague people of African descent in North America, in Europe, and in some South American countries. Guyana is far removed as a nation state from that type of discrimination and and casting aside people of African descent. People of African descent are participants in the wholesale development of Guyana. It has been so for decades. And so this fiction that somehow people of African descent are second class in this country of ours is just utter foolishness. In every sphere of activity, people of African descent participate at the level of government. From since Guyana became independent, people of African descent, they have participated, continue to participate in all strata of society, in the field of education, in science, in all the issues. Development as regards present day development, the people of African descent are participant in the development. But these guys, the only thing they know to do, it is to fan the flames. It is to attempt to say to Black people, people of African descent, and let me say this importantly, look, these guys don't care a damn about the ordinary Black person. They attempt to use them for political purposes to gain political power. That is what it is for. It's not that they care anything about ordinary Black people. And we saw it not so long ago. 5 years they were in government. What did they do? What did they do for Black people? And we have to always take people of African descent Black back there. What these people did for you? Nothing. But they continue to cry crocodile tears, think they could hoodwink people continuously. But I say this, that people of African descent in Guyana are wiser now. They cannot be hoodwinked. Of course, they have a set of people, as Vice President said, who will continue to drink the Kool-Aid. But a large percentage of people of African descent, they know the truth of Guyana's development under the People's Progressive Party Civic, past and present. And they are participating in that development every day. They're participating and benefiting in that development.
Just to jump in on that as well, we see that as it relates to the construction work that is happening across Guyana right now. If you look at South Georgetown, a lot of the persons who are receiving the contracts to do the work in South Georgetown are from the communities themselves, and these are largely Afro-Guyanese communities in some instances as well.
But the other important point is,
and
look.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Oneidge.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, look. The People's National Congress and the Apnoites, as I call them, they want to keep Black people continually in abject poverty so that they can utilize them and manipulate them. They don't want them to be empowered. And the point you raise is that we are seeking to empower people at a local level, and that is the reason why the opportunity is allowed for ordinary people in communities to participate in contracts and participate in development of their own community. And for the people like Mr. Hughes and company, they don't want that to take place. And that is the reason why they cry out every day and they find things to say about it. But the people themselves, recognizing that they're useless, they cannot represent their interests. People are coming to represent their own interests. And that is the reason why you see when these meetings are happening, like as happened yesterday in Sophia, you see hundreds of people, they come out to tell their story, to put before the government their issues so that the government can treat with their issues and ensure the development happen in their communities. They're not anymore looking to the opposition and the likes of Mr. Hughes and them to represent their case.
Minister Walrond, you wanted to make a point in that regard as well?
Well, no, I think Joe has made the point in terms of the participation of Afro-Guyanese at all levels. We start from the contractors that we are constantly engaging as part of a policy. As Joe said, they were in government not too long ago. Where were the policies that they had to bring Afro-Guyanese contractors and give them contracts in their communities? Where was that? It was non-existent. And so and all the way up to the discipline services, the judiciary. So full participation at all levels of and we can just see that. And we don't have to belabor that point. Darwin, of particular concern to me, however, as head of delegation to this forum, it was for us to have a debate, an open and honest debate, as nation states about the work that has been done in relation to the recognition of people of Afro descent, and what other work is left to be done. Because as you know, and our nation knows, we have a strong advocate in our government, in our president, as it relates to the promotion of people of Afro descent, their recognition for their work, and the fact that, and extremely vocal in terms of reparations. One of the things that I've mentioned at the forum, and we continue to laud, is the fact that Guyana is the only country that is paying for their reparations commission. And the chairperson of that commission, we paid to attend the forum, Mr. Eric Phillips. And we continue to push and promote the work of reparations for this awful scourge of slavery and the lasting effects that it has on people of Afro descent. And we see that. We have seen President Ali over and over be an advocate. I have not seen any interview from any one of the ones who purport to be leaders of Afro-Guyanese in Guyana and their spokespeople. I've never seen them be so vocal about the fact that we ought to be compensated and to approach reparations and the request for reparation in such a structured and way that we have, in fact, and supported by finances and resources, as our government continues to do. And that is just one of the ways in which Guyana has been able to exemplify the promotion and support for our Afro-Guyanese brothers and sisters, including of which I am part.
Minister
But
continue, go ahead.
What has troubled me, though, is that in this debate, we have Nigel Hughes, who speaks on behalf of this organization that calls itself IDPADA-G, has now decided to use in his 2 minutes of presentation the lies as a basis for his argument to make the government, I believe, look bad. And as Minister Hampton said, is to ultimately make the country look bad. One has to wonder, and we all have to wonder, what is really the motive for this, flying all the way to Geneva to come out to peddle lies. And so one of the lies, because Mr. Hughes, we all know, is a prominent lawyer, and so these are some things that he can't. It would be very difficult to say that he didn't know. At least I can be generous enough to say that maybe he did such a rush job with trying to make us look bad that he mentioned there were two troubling misinformation that I wish to now address in his presentation. One of it is that he made mention of the Human Rights Committee hearing on Guyana and made mention of a quote that the committee remains concerned about the absence of comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that may extend beyond discrimination in employment, and said that this meant that the committee was referring to African Guyanese as victims of discrimination. No, this is absolutely not so. That report and that specific quote was mentioned in relation to discrimination against the LGBTQ communities. And the Human Rights Committee made the point that we do not have, as Guyana does not have as yet, anti-discrimination laws against LGBTQ persons. And this is what the quote was lifted and meant to apply to, not to the fact that we do not have that there is no anti-discrimination laws for Afro-Guyanese. And to use that as a basis for that argument was incredibly disingenuous and very disappointing, as one we would, I think, some of us would expect better from Mr. Hughes. And in fact, just as we are mentioning that, Guyana has enshrined in its constitution, its supreme law, we have there is protection against discrimination, all kinds of discrimination, including race, for everyone, and there is recourse in the law, as our constitution says, which of course I know Mr. Nigel Hughes knows. Another major part and aspect of the misinformation is that, and he says that we have the, I want to use his specific words, practical, that the Durban Declaration calls for the inclusion of history in the school curricula. Now, this is African history. Ghana has always been teaching history at all levels in primary school, age appropriate ways in which we teach our history in secondary schools. And we have all been to to primary school and secondary school, so we could attest to this. We teach history as well and the impacts of slavery. Our secondary school curriculum is the CARICOM secondary school curriculum that goes in depth into slavery and the impacts of slavery on people of Afro descent. And in fact, we teach our history about all ethnic groups to all ethnic groups. This is unlike some of the other countries that we know that we are finding resistance to teaching Afro-centric history and history about slavery in some schools. There's resistance to that. But Guyana has always been presenting this in the schools and teaching this at all levels, primary and secondary. So to say to this forum that we do not teach history and that there is practical measures such as teaching young people the importance of tolerance. Guyana is one of the most tolerant societies that we could find. We all grew up. We never see as little as children growing up Indian and Chinese, and we never see races. We all get together. We celebrate each other. We eat each other's food. And to him to go to this forum and say that we are divided and that we don't celebrate and we don't teach our history about slavery and its effects on people of Afro descent, and in fact its effects on the country, that we do not teach them in the schools, is very disingenuous and very disappointing, because it's an outright untruth.
But ministers, where do we go from here? I mean, all these statements that have been made are particularly damaging, and we see that there's an aggressive push to promote this country as one Guyana and bringing everybody under one umbrella, recognizing our differences and uniting the country. And a lot of work is being done in that regard to create equitable opportunities and so on. But where do we go from here when these statements continue to be made?
The point is this: look, don't get our hopes up. These people will continue to be what they are. This is who they are. This is what they are. Because everything they do or do not do, it is all a calculation of how to get and gain power. And if they have to manipulate words, they have to be disingenuous, they have to manipulate people of African descent, they will do all of that because many of these people, they're of the view that they have lost some social space. And so, it's a fight for what they thought was divine right of social space in Guyana. So I will say this to the listeners. As a nation, we have to continue to do what we're doing. We have a nation to build. We have our people, they have great expectations. Our people at all levels, they want a better life for themselves and their children. That is our focus. These distractions will come along and we will answer them like we are doing, even though we are way uh, far away in Geneva. We're using this opportunity to answer these distractions, these persons who will tell bold-faced lie, so the Guyanese people will not be uh, continue to lie to and will not be deceived. Look, and it even started since yesterday. Mr. Burke put up Nias Suban photograph, and basically in his post he said that this was the person who was representing Guyana diaspora until we put up the delegation. I'm told then he pulled it down. So these people will continue to do what they're doing. The Village Voice, until Minister Waldron straightened them out last evening, responding to their lies that they peddled about our presentation. And so we have to stay focused, we have to stay vigilant, and we have to continue to answer them. Nothing will pass, nothing shall pass. But our energies, we must put in the work to ensure that we develop our country, to ensure that we put before the Guyanese people policies and programs that would help to change their lives and to transform this great country of ours we call Guyana.
Thank you, Minister Hamilton. Minister Walrond, can I also get you on that question of where do we go from here?
I'm reminded as we are here at this forum that one of the um, ideals and the rights that were generated under this framework of the advancement and recognition of people of Afghanistan is our right to self-determination and the freedom of association. And I would say to my fellow Afro-Guyanese that you have a right to decide, to listen to truth, to listen, to see what is before you, to see the options, to see the opportunities that this government has presented to you. And you have the right to choose who you wish to associate with. We are often, as Afro-Guyanese, denigrated because we're supporting a government that is progressive, a government that cares about its people, all of its people, a government that has as its philosophy one Guyana. Whenever we are presented anywhere, when we look at our meetings, there is such diversity in the cabinet, in all in aspects and spheres of our lives as Guyanese. We see a government that is inclusive and is constantly reaching out, reaching across bridges to all Guyanese, all walks of life. And I say to our Afro Guyanese, don't be hoodwinked. And I understand that there is the the tendency to from the other groups to manipulate and to pull on our heartstrings and pull on what we know and to and from what we may consider normal in terms of that we should be afraid of the unknown, and we should be afraid of this government who is not in looking after your interests. All we have to do is look at the evidence. Who has removed their cash grant? Who has restored their cash grant? Look at the development in this country. Look at the attempts to bring our people, local content legislation, all of it to bring Guyanese, to give Guyanese the opportunities, all of the events and that we and programs to benefit all of all Guyanese people. And I say to our Afro-Guyanese brothers, don't be hoodwinked. When you look at the people who are purporting to speak on your behalf and to advocate for you, they have never reached out a hand to you when they were had the opportunity to do so. IDPADA-G claims to represent, first it was 60, and then now it's now 78 organizations. Where are the faces of those organizations? Who are they? You're seeing a handful of people. On one hand, I can count the people who claim to be IDPADA-G, who claim to be, no, we want to be the ones to receive the monies so we can give it to our Africo-Guyanese thing. We are saying, I am saying to all, don't, that we can see the difference, that you have the right to determine for yourself, that you can break away from the norm of associating with groups that do not have your interests at heart, but they may look like you, but they certainly do not have your interests at heart. And to take the plunge and to come over and come to and embrace a philosophy, a government that cares, that truly wants to build a Guyana that is united, a Guyana in which there's development. And we want to hear you. We want to reach out to all our Guyanese, and we want for us to be able to build a Guyana that is prosperous. And we cannot do so as we allow these voices of division who have their own agenda, their own agenda. We can see it, and they're willing to use innuendo, they're willing to use lies, they're willing to turn up in places where they feel that they can force the government out. They're willing to rig elections. They're willing to do all kinds of reprehensible acts and say all kinds of things to get into power. And it has nothing to do with the interests of our Afro-Guyanese people. And I say, wake up, listen. I know many of us have, but I want us to continue to do so. And I want to be able to say, and that it is not with any amount of, it is not with any amount of glee that I am saddened that our Afro-Guyanese leaders really do not, the ones who claim to be our leaders, because I believe there is a new set of leadership that is raising up that are really and truly interested in the advancement of not only just Afro-Guyanese, because Guyana is a multi-ethnic, multi-plural society, but for all of us to raise up together and raise each other up as one. So where we go from here is continuing to spread the message that we are better together, we are better united, and that the ones who claim to have our interests of heart, we have seen their true colors, and for us to really believe it. Thank you very much, Darwin.
Thank you very much, Minister Walrond. Thank you very much, Minister Hamilton, who are both
Pleasure.
joining
Thank
us
you too.
from Geneva in Switzerland, where they're attending the third session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. Thank you both for your work, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our viewers for
Thank
watching
you.
us.